Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. Pink & Main just released a special crafty Christmas box. This is not part of their monthly subscriptions and can be purchased individually. It is so much fun and just packed with all kinds of crafty goodies. I will include a link to my unboxing video in the description box if you want to take a closer look at everything that is included. This is a special edition kit, so quantities are limited. Links are in the description box if you are interested in purchasing this kit. So let's go ahead and get started with my first set of cards. I'm using a sketch by Sandy Allnock. This is sketch number 3. And if you are interested in any of the card sketches I use, I do provide all of that information on my coordinating blog post, and that link is in the description box below. The kit includes a full 6x6 paper pad, so there's 24 sheets of double-sided papers, and I love the variety of colors included. For this first card, I think these colors look very patriotic. There's that little hint of pink, but otherwise this is all red, white, and blue. So for the background, I'm just going to use some white cardstock. And then I'll also be using 2 different pattern papers, that blue paper with the little white stars, and then a little busier design with some holly and mistletoe. And then the kit includes this really pretty glitter ribbon, has red and white glitter pieces on it. So I'm going to have 2 pieces of that ribbon going across the back of the card. And I'm just layering it on some red cardstock. And I just use some score tape to adhere the ribbon onto the cardstock, and then also some score tape for the back side of this piece. Since I wrapped the end of the ribbon behind, I just want to make sure that's all going to stay in place. So since this large piece with all of the little white stars is going on top of those ribbon layers, I'm just going to use some thin foam squares just to keep it all nice and even on the card. And then for that lower portion that's going on top of the ribbon, I'm just going to use some liquid adhesive. I find that whenever you try to adhere something to glitter, like a glitter texture, liquid adhesive just seems to hold things a little bit better. So now for this little banner that goes behind the focal point, I'm just using some more of the red cardstock, cut some fishtails on both ends. I'll just adhere that onto that star pattern paper. And then I'll add my busier design with the little holly and the mistletoe. And I did layer all of these pieces using some blue cardstock, and this is one from my stash. The kit does include some colored cardstock, but I use so much with all of the layers, I will include additional cardstock from my room. So now I'm stamping the sentiment using some red ink, and this is a beautiful sentiment. I love the font. So it's "Believe in the Magic of the Season." And I'll just layer that on some more of this blue cardstock, adhere it to my card, and then just a finishing touch, I'm adding one of the small star gems that's included in the kit. And I did make 2 cards using this sketch. I really like how this card turned out. Patriotic colors are always one of my favorite combos. So now moving on to my next set of cards, I'm using a sketch from Mojo Monday. This is number 525. I really like all of the circle elements on this sketch and thought it would be a great opportunity to combine several different pattern papers from this paper collection. So for the background, I'm using this snowflake paper, layering that on some more of the blue cardstock. And yes, there is a circle cut out of the back. I'll be using that later. I'll go ahead and adhere my card front onto a card base. And for that strip going across the card, I just used some white pearlescent paper, layered that in some more of this blue cardstock. And now for the circles, that largest circle with the star pattern, I used most of that pattern paper on the previous cards, but I still had enough to cut out most of the circle as well. So that part that's cut off, you're not going to see it because the other 2 circles are going to cover it up. So this is a great way to use up some of those smaller leftover pattern paper scraps. Now, even though I am combining several different pattern papers, I looked for patterns that weren't too busy so they wouldn't compete with one another. The blue with the stars and that blue with the snowflake are very tone-on-tone muted designs, and then just a little hint of color with that diagonal striped paper. And I did decide not to layer the two circles, the two behind, with any of the blue pattern paper. And that way just the sentiment could kind of pop up just that little bit more. And now I want to add a little more color to this card rather than just all of that blue, especially with that diagonal stripe paper. It's got all those other colors, the greens and the reds. So I'm using one of the poinsettia flowers that are included in the kit. They're separate pieces, so they all have a little thread that comes through the hole, but I didn't want that part on the card, so I just snipped it off, left just a little bit of a tail, and then just to make sure those flowers weren't going to come apart on the card, I secured that tiny little thread using a piece of score tape. And then I just used some glue dots to adhere it to the card. And then I'm just adding two small banners in that upper right hand corner, bringing out a little bit more of the red color. And then just a finishing touch, I'm going to add some of the small red sequins that are included in the kit. And there's only one size of the red sequins. So I'm putting two of them on those banners in that upper right hand corner, and then three of them in the lower left hand corner. And that way I'm bringing out more of that red color to go with that stripe pattern paper. So there is my finished card, and I did make two using this sketch. Now moving on to my next card design. This is Operation Write Home sketch number 200. And I really love the pink papers that are included in this kit because of course I love pink. So for this card I'm really going to focus on just pink and white. I'm also adding in some silver mirror cardstock since I really like this extra shine. The background paper, I have the white paper with pink snowflakes, and then for that strip going across the card I have pink paper with these little white stars, and then just a sliver piece of white pearlescent paper, layering all of that with some more of that silver specialty cardstock. Go ahead and adhere my card front onto a card base. And I did decide to color one of the little images in this kit. I don't color very often, so I didn't record me coloring. Not my gift, just something I do occasionally. But I couldn't resist coloring this adorable little car with all of the presents on the hood. And of course it had to be pink. I used a stitched rectangle die for the car and then layered that in some pink cardstock. And now I'm stamping a sentiment in some pink ink from Pink and Main. I think I'm saying the word pink quite a bit for this card, but that's okay. Pink is fun. I'm just layering that oval die cut on some more of the silver specialty paper using a scalloped oval die. And then just one final touch, I'm adding a small snowflake cut out of that silver cardstock, and this is a die from Pink and Main. I believe it's in one of their Wreath builder sets, their Christmas set. So there is my finished card, and I did make two, and I really like how that one turned out. So now moving on to my next card design. I won't be using a card sketch this time. The background paper is some white pearlescent paper, and I used this present embossing folder that's included in the kit. And I'm going to layer all of that on some of the red glitter paper that's also included in the kit. Really pretty. And just to make sure that these two papers are going to stay put, since I'm going to adhere it onto glitter paper, I'm adding a few strips of score tape and then also some liquid adhesive. Just want to make sure it's not going to fall apart later. So go ahead and layer those two pieces. And then I just have a piece of the pattern paper for that strip going across the card and layered that in some red cardstock. Then I'll add adhesive to the back of my card front, adhere it onto a card base. Then next I pulled out this red tag and also this little wooden piece that's included in the kit. I'm going to do some heat embossing for a sentiment on this red tag. So I have some Versamark ink. I have the sentiment Be Merry. I treated the paper with some anti-static powder first, And now I'm going to use some white embossing powder. Kind of tapping away, wiping off those extra little pieces, little strays. Then I'll get my heat gun and heat set that sentiment. I love the bold white embossing powder on this beautiful red. And then I'm also going to do some heat embossing for the gift. So again, using some Versamark ink, and my ink pad is very stained. Not sure how that ended up that way, but it still works. So I just pressed the wood piece into the ink pad, made sure to get it really wet, and then I'm sprinkling on some gold glitz embossing powder. So it's this beautiful gold color that has just a hint of glitter in it. Really pretty. Go ahead and heat set that. Look at all of that shine. And now I'll be adhering it to the tag, but first I'm going to add some twine. So this is not included in the kit, just I have a ton of twine, lots of different colors. So this is a red with white striped. Just looped it through the whole of the tag, and then to make sure that's not going to come off later, I just put a small piece of score tape behind the twine, and then I'm going to pop up this whole tag using some foam dimensional tape. I always make sure to get good coverage so that one part won't sag, although these tags have a nice thickness to them. And I'll just adhere that to the card front, and I decided to put it just a little bit crooked just for a little interest on the card. I'm going to put some liquid adhesive behind that little wooden present, adhere that to the tag, and then just some finishing touches. I'm going to put a small banner in that upper right hand corner using some more of the glitter paper. Then I pulled out this beautiful sequin mix that's included in the kit, and I'm using a few of the gold pieces, and there's also a clear star. So I put the star by the Be Merry, and then at first I was going to use some of the red. I changed my mind, so you can see me just kind of fussing with different pieces, and then I ended up just using 2 of the gold in that upper left hand corner of the tag. And I'll adhere those in place using some small glue dots. I love how this card turned out. The gold and white and red together just looks so pretty. So there is my finished card, and that is card number 7. So now moving on to my next card design. This is a sketch from Mojo Monday, number 251. And I really like this sketch when you have just some small pattern paper pieces left. I mean, I still have quite a few full sheets left over, but I wanted to show a card using some smaller scraps. Most of the time, paper pads coordinate really well together, all of the designs. So using a sketch like this is a great way to not waste some of those smaller pieces. So I put the 3 different pattern papers on some white pearlescent paper, and then layered that on the green cardstock that's included in the kit. And then I cut out a stitched circle die cut, and then also a scallop circle die cut, stamped the sentiment, and I did use my mini MISTI just to make sure I had a good stamped impression. And then just a few finishing touches. I'm adding some of the glitter buttons, and then also some more of these star gems. And I just put a few of them around the sentiment. Overall, this is a very simple card design. You could easily add more embellishments or an image to change up that look, but I really like how this turned out. And I did make 2 cards using this sketch. So next up is a sketch from OWH. This is number 160. And this is another really great sketch to use some small scraps that are left over, but I decided to use the same pattern paper for those 5 strips in the background. It would be really cute to use 5 different pattern papers as well. I've done both in the past. So when I'm lining up all of these strips, since I have 5 of them, I kind of lay them out loosely and then start with the outer 2 pieces and then work my way in, just trying to get nice even placement. I'm layering all of this using some more of this green cardstock that's included in the kit. And then I have the pattern paper with all of the holly and mistletoe. Put that on some of this red cardstock that has pre-embossed little polka dots. And then I'll just go ahead and adhere my card front onto a card base. And I've already stamped the sentiment and a little holly image, colored that with some Copic markers. And I just stamped this on a stitched banner die cut. I decided not to layer it in any other colors because that white really stands out quite a bit on this card. So now just a finishing touch, I'm adding some more of these small star gems. So again, another very simple design. I love the bold colors, and I did make 2 more using some of those Patriotic colors with that little hint of pink. I like how they all turned out. So now moving on to my next card design. This is card number 13. So again, I don't show my coloring just because I'm not an expert at all. I stamped this wreath and I colored it in a soft green and pink. And I have all of this on a stitched rectangle die cut. And now I'm going to heat emboss the sentiment. So this is All Hearts Come Home for Christmas. So I pre-treated the paper with some anti-static powder. I'm using some beautiful silver embossing powder. Go ahead and get that heat set. You can see some of that beautiful shine. And now I'm going to use another one of the wood pieces and do some heat embossing on it. So this is a little set of bells. And I did pull out another Versamark ink pad. I found one that wasn't quite so stained. I'm just pressing that into the ink, getting it super wet, adding my embossing powder. I'll sprinkle on some more on little places that got missed. Go ahead and heat set that. You can see that beautiful shine. And I do move my tweezers just because one of the little spots didn't get heat set very well, just where the tweezers were. So I'll let that cool for a moment. And then because I did some heat embossing that always warps the paper just a little bit, I'm going to add some score tape behind before I add it to some layered cardstock. And I'm using some pink cardstock that's just from my stash. It matched really nicely with the berries that I colored on this wreath image. And I used a scalloped rectangle die to cut out that pink paper. And both of these dies are from Pink in Maine. And then I'm going to layer all of this on some more of this silver mirror specialty cardstock. And I'm going to use some more score tape just because it's still warped just slightly from the heat embossing, and I just want to make sure it stays nice and flat on the card. So remove all of the backing and try to get it nice and straight on this specialty cardstock. I'll add my card front onto a card base. This card has a lot of beautiful shine, and I think this could work as a wedding card, especially with the bells. So other than the sentiment, this could really work perfectly for a winter wedding. So I'll adhere my bells onto the wreath, and then just a finishing touch, I'm using a few of these beautiful pink gems that are included in the kit. And I just put one on each side of the sentiment, and I was trying to place that card where you could actually see the sentiment without the bright lights, but it didn't quite work. And that is one of the reasons I do share the still photos of all of the cards that I make. So now moving on to my next card design. This is a sketch from MFT. It's number 459. I'm using this beautiful holly paper with these thin red and white stripes in the background. Adding some of this red paper with the white stars, and then also just a thin strip of green cardstock. I'm going to add my card front onto a card base, and I'm using another one of the tags, and this one's really pretty. It has this gold glitter finish on the lower portion of the tag. I'm going to use some more of this red and white twine, feed it through the hole on the tag, and this time I'm unraveling all of the ends just to give it a little different look. And then I'll just use a small piece of score tape to adhere the twine just to make sure it doesn't fall off later on. I'm going to use some more foam dimensional tape, get good coverage on the whole tag. That way there isn't one side that's going to sag at all. And then I'll adhere that onto my card. And now I'll add a sentiment. I have a stitched circle die cut and then also that scallop circle die cut. I'm using the sentiment, All Hearts Come Home for Christmas again, stamping it in some red ink. I'll layer that on that scallop circle die cut. And I did cut that scallop circle die cut out of that background red cardstock just to make sure I had enough of that specific color. Adhere that onto the tag using some liquid adhesive. And then I'm using these holly leaves that are included in the sequin mix. Thought they were really pretty, had a nice shine. So I'm going to put some small pieces of foam tape on the back side of the piece that's kind of hanging off of the tag. And then I'll use some liquid adhesive for the part that's touching that circle die cut. I'm going to put the two together, touching just a little bit. And I keep putting that other leaf down, trying to see where I'm going to need to add the foam tape. And then I'll adhere that to the card, and then I'm using 3 of the red sequins, so they'll look like the little holly berries. So using some liquid adhesive to adhere those in place, and then just one more, and I'm trying to make sure it's not covering up any of the sentiment. Then I thought about adding a few of the gold sequins as well, and then changed my mind. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 14. So now moving on to my final set of cards, I'm using the Quilt die by Pink & Main, and then I have this big assortment of paper scraps. So I'm going to make 2 cards. I have all of the pieces cut out. I also have the frames cut out of some solid cardstock, and I have 2 different styles. So the card that I'm going to show, I'm doing a pattern. So each of the specific pieces, like those outside triangles, are all the same pattern paper. And then the card on the right, or the pieces on the right, are just using an assortment of pattern paper. So there's no specific pattern or design that I'm using. So I put score tape on the back side of this quilt frame. And now I'm just going to inlay all of those cutout pieces. And whenever I make quilt cards, I always lay out all of the pieces, kind of build the quilt on just some cardstock, some scrap paper. That way I know I have all of the pieces that I need, like I didn't miss one of those rectangles. And you can kind of get an idea. Like I want to also make sure I'm not placing the same pieces next to each other if I'm really trying to do more of a random assortment. So I'm not showing the other assembly just because it's exactly the same, but I will show the finished card at the end. So now I just pulled the backing off of the score tape and adhered this quilt onto some pearlescent paper. And I'm going to stamp a sentiment. I was trying to decide if I want to do a pink or blue. Decided to go with the pink. It's the Be Merry, and because I am stamping on some pearlescent paper, sometimes that ink doesn't dry very quickly, so I'm just using some clear embossing powder. That way I know that ink isn't going to smear, and I'll add just a really pretty shine. Go ahead and add some score tape to the back side, and then I'll adhere that piece onto some blue cardstock. And I was going to use some more pink, but I'm actually out of this color, so decided to go with the blue since there's still a lot of blue on the paper. Then I'll put my card front onto a card base. And then just one final finishing touch, I'm using some more of the star gems, and I'm putting just an assortment of them around the sentiment. So overall, this card is fairly simple, but it has so much detail with those quilt pieces since they all have that little faux stitching around them. And there you can see the red card I did as well. Quilt cards have always been my favorite, and the quilt dies make it so simple. So now here's just a quick recap of the 16 cards I made using Pink & Main's special edition Christmas box. This is not part of their monthly subscription, so it can be purchased individually. Quantities are still very limited, so if you are interested in purchasing this kit, I would suggest not waiting. I have provided links in the description box for all of the products used in this video. I had so much fun using this kit. This paper pad is just beautiful, lots of bold and vibrant colors, and the stamp set has some great images and sentiments. I'd love to know which card was your favorite. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.